Okay, so welcome back. This is part two of this demonstration video. So we have the basic forms all here. We're going to start altering some of these forms just a bit so that we can add some interest and exercise some of the one-point perspective aspects or attributes to this drawing, so make it look a little bit more interesting. So the first thing I want to do is I want to complete the backside. We got the backside of this first cube. We got the backside of this side uh, rectangular form. We didn't finish this. Let's do that right now. So as we know that this element was 3/4 high, so that's a quarter of the distance. And this is, and we want to extend it back only halfway. And so when we did our crisscross method here, we found that that was not only halfway in height, but was also halfway from the front to the back as well, because we went from all four corners to get to that point. So we know that this line right here that we drew represents halfway back. Now, I do want to point out how disproportionate, how much visual distortion is occurring here, that this is clearly not half the distance by measurement, but it is by perspective. So please try to remember there is a difference between what we measure and what is projected, and all those distortion elements that occur and the optical kind of illusions that occur with distance. So as a result, we're going to complete this box right here. That means that we started these lines, we didn't know where to take them to. So we're going to take those and project them just a bit further than what we did initially to the vanishing point. All projection lines go to the single vanishing point. So I'm going to take that over here and we're going to just stop it lightly about here. We're going to do the same thing on the other side, on the lower element, and we're going to extend it to about there. Now, remembering the idea that if it's parallel with the picture plane, we keep it horizontal. So this back wall, same as the front, is going to be horizontal. And we found the halfway point here. We're going to extend it up. It'll start at the bottom because that's a known line right here. So we'll take that across and we'll stop it where it intersects with the projection line here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that in. Now this element, the lower element, is complete. Now, how do we find where the top piece works? Well, we have two methods. One, we can project down from the 3/4 inch height here and do what we did before and extend a line across. And as we do, we're going to find an intersection point. And as we do that, all we have to do is connect the two. So the projection line with the 3/4 height element here gives us a little bit more information. So we're going to go ahead and extend that line across. And where the two intersect, we should have a test point, and that's what works just fine there. So I'm going to complete that piece. Now, so we can see that we have the center element. We're going to remove this leading line right here. So this whole area will be an interior of one space. It'll be a little different on the left than it is in the center, but it is still contiguous as a space. So we're simply going to erase our earlier line that we used to form that original cube. And hopefully what you'll see, what remains here, is, we'll go ahead and get rid of this line because it's not as necessary anymore. Now, hopefully you'll see the form. This is one space. And so that's what I mean about the one-point perspective. We build it, and then we can start to articulate it and make it interesting. We're going to continue that process now. So we're going to add an element over here. If you look at your example, it gives you some information. We're going to make kind of a step-up bench type of element. for lack of a better term, and that's going to be 2 inches wide by 1 inch high, out here as measured out here at the face. So measuring 1 inch high, I'm going to measure and mark, and 2 inches over here, measure and mark. And we're going to extend them up because they're both parallel. Vertical stays vertical and horizontal stays horizontal because they are both parallel with the picture plane. Now, we're going to extend those all the way back to this back wall right here. So, to do that, we're going to project all 3 lines, starting at the bottom, project it up till it stops at the back wall here. We're going to do the same thing for the intermediate line or the upper line, but we don't know where that stops yet. So we're just going to take it beyond, a little bit beyond what's happening on the bottom. And then we're going to do the same thing for the line that's adjacent to the leftmost wall. So we're going to take it, and when it hits that corner, it's going to stop. So we have this line going to the bottom line, this left line, or left furthest line that's on the outer wall, it's going to follow itself to that edge. And now, as we project these up vertical and horizontal again, we're going to find that they align. That form looks similar to that form, and so we have that piece completed. So I'm going to make those a little bit harder line here so we can see them just a little bit more. And I'm going to erase this back piece here because it's no longer in the view. But remember, we're not going to erase it completely. We're going to need to refer back to it. And I'm going to spruce up this part of the drawing here in just a minute. Okay, so let's get these lines on here a little bit more boldly so we can spot them just a bit better. And again, projecting to the vanishing point. And the last line here. Okay, so you can see the predominant lines are provided here. We can still see a ghosting of what's beyond, and that may be helpful as we move to the next step. So the other elements that we're going to apply are some cutouts. We're going to put a cutout here in the corner, and that corner cutout is intended to provide us with some interest or some interesting openings in the volume that's provided. So the goal is that we're going to be halfway back and halfway down. So now remember, we're not talking about this space anymore. We're talking about just this space. So halfway would be from this corner down to the if we're using the crisscross method, from this corner to this corner. That's still ghosted on your drawing, and so we want to go there. We're not going to the top of the bench. We're going to the height, the full height of the object. So we're going to go ahead and put in those lines very lightly so we know where they are. So as we extend that line, we're going to go from this corner to this corner. Do the same thing on the opposite, in the opposite direction, lightly. That right there is the middle point. Now remember, this element right here is your horizon line. So don't get confused with that. It's simply a reference that got us to the vanishing point. So keep that on there, but you know, let's not get that confused with the remaining piece of the drawing. So we know now that that's the halfway point. And we can go ahead and project from there to the back corner because that's where our example shows us. So we know that's half height. Now we want to go halfway back. So, well, if this is the plane that we're cutting and we marked it with an X, by marking it with that X, we have not only found the middle of its height, but the middle of its distance back. So simply coming in and putting in a vertical line there at that intersection point, that provides us with the half high, half back. So that's our whole in this object. And, you know, if we were drawing this with more realistic elements, we would be showing thicknesses of walls and so on. But for this diagram, we're just using very thin measurements for separations of these elements. So this part of the drawing is complete. We have this bench element and we have the cutout. Back here, we're going to probably want to clean up this vertical edge a bit. So now we have a strong form here. It turns a corner and goes another half back to the end of, or the back of the object. So next we have a series of openings that we want to place in this side of the drawing, and there's some elements that are identified. We want some alignment. So those alignments would indicate that there's some continuity in design, alignment of this opening here with a smaller opening here. So we're going to look at that. Now, some of the things that we need to understand is that we're talking about proportionality. These aren't necessarily to scale, but they're following some sense of proportion. And so we can use some of the alignments that we had previously. So what we want to do here is we want this corner and this edge to line up. Well, because we know the placement of it, that means that it's going to behave the same way. So using the rules that we talked about earlier, if it stays horizontal and it's aligning, so it's horizontal, if it's staying parallel with the picture plane, it will be horizontal. And since this element is identified as halfway back, this one's going to do the same, and they want that to align. Same thing up here. So simply identifying a line that comes across and a line that comes across the lower portion is going to give us the basic alignment. Now, since this element up here is kind of floating, we have nothing to anchor it to. But down here, we definitely have something. So let's use that line because we know that it aligns here, comes across, and where it hits right there on that corner, we can project that up. So we stopped it right up here, and that's the aligned corner. This corner and this inside corner are going to be aligned. Now, in the same way, the opening is projecting on this plane coming out. It's now going to be required to project. So our verticals are vertical, horizontals are horizontal, but this line is going to have to project to the vanishing point because it is extending away from the picture plane in a perpendicular fashion. So as a result, we're going to go from the vanishing point through that first corner that we found. We're going to extend it out. We don't have to do that down here because it's already provided. So how far are we going? And if we look at our element, it says we're going a quarter back from the front. Okay, so what does that mean? What it means is that we know the halfway. We're going to use the same trick as we've been using. That means that we found that by using the crisscross method on this plane, we could find the halfway. And we found it above in this element when we were creating this left side. So we can do the same down here. There's a couple ways to do that. And that is to create that half of a half or quarter projection forward. So by taking the half, we know that this half is lined up here and it's aligned on the left side or the right side. So then by taking a second half here, this creates a point right there, which is 1/4 forward. Okay, so by bringing that across there, that created that edge. We simply put a vertical there because, again, it's a vertical. Verticals stay vertical. And where it intersected, that projection line back here, now we have that opening. So we have an opening here, and we need another opening here, but we're not going to see all the parts of it. So let's remember that in order for alignment to occur, it means that it's simply a horizontal line, and that projection line can be handled in a similar way. So at this point, we're going to take the new projection point here, this corner that we just created, and we're going to extend it out, and we're going to come down to the lower portion and extend it out. And once it transitions over the horizontal, the projected lower line, that floor line, then we know where the placement of that vertical is going to be. So the same thing we did here is that once we found that placement, then we created a vertical line. Well, this is simply a horizontal projection to the right side, and that's going to give us that element. So we project that up, and that's that edge. It will be parallel and very similar to what's going on here, but the top and the bottom projection lines are slightly different. So we can still, remembering the rule that these lines are projecting along this line, we are going to project that corner down to the vanishing point. So to clean this up, we're going to erase some lines. And this should give us this portion of the drawing. And we have the left side completed, and we have the right side completed. Now that we've created a little hole here, a little opening, we can see the back corner. So let's go ahead and put that back corner in. Before it was just dashed, but now we can see it. So we're going to go ahead and tighten up those lines so we see this object a little bit more clearly. Now we don't see the top yet, but we do see this. So now you can see we're in a space. We have this space on this side that was added, but we also have this space that we go through to get to this long narrow area. So we have all those elements in place. We're ready to go to our last portion of this demonstration video. So we'll be back in just a moment.